What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be doing a quick tabletop comparison of the brand new CZ P09 C Nocturne versus the legacy CZ P-07 model that it's replacing. Now internally, these guns are nearly identical. So for all intents and purposes, this is definitely an evolution of the previous design and not a revolution. Now the outgoing P-07 has a great track record of reliability and being a great platform for carry, home defense, and general range use. And since they should, in theory, shoot nearly identically, I'm not going to be comparing the shooting experience of these two guns today. Instead, I'm going to be focusing on the details of what was changed for anyone that's curious about the latest model from CZ. And I'm going to make sure to get a lot of nice, close, detailed shots so that you can really get a handle on what the differences actually are. So the first and most obvious difference that we have here is that the Nocturne is now truly optics ready right out of the box. We finally have a direct milled optic cut from CZ, which allows optics to be mounted directly to the slide without using a plate. Now that is fantastic news, easily the biggest upgrade to this model, and with any luck, hopefully this is a preview of what we can expect to see from CZ in the future. Now as for the cut itself, it's a good looking cut, specifically designed to work with Holosun K series red dots. Now I've got a full-size Holosun EPS on here, and in my opinion, it's an ideal fit for this slide. There's less than 1 millimeter of overhang on either side of the slide, and the luminescent 3-dot sights co-witness perfectly with it. So this is definitely my favorite upgrade on this new model. Now the second biggest change is to the grip texture, and in my opinion, this is actually a pretty substantial improvement. The biggest problem with the texture on the original P-07 design is how absent it was from a lot of the grip. The whole top third of the grip area is completely smooth on the previous model of the CZ P-07. There was a little bit of checkering on the front strap and also the back strap, but for me personally, a lot of my recoil control comes from pressing the palm of my support hand into the back side of the grip frame, and as you can see here, the P-07 has no texture here whatsoever. It's completely smooth. So in that regard, I think the P09 C Nocturne is a big upgrade. You can see here we have texture going up much higher on the grip, which allows you to gain more traction with a nice high grip with your support hand. And then both the front and back of the pistol grip have a lot more texture on them than they did before. So for me personally, this gives me a lot more confidence that I'm going to be able to get a nice tight grip on the gun and control recoil better with the P09 C Nocturne than I could with the P-07. Now from a practical standpoint, is it really going to give you way better control and allow you to shoot faster and more accurately than with the previous model? Maybe, but most likely not. I do, however, think that it gives the user an overall better experience and interface with the pistol, and so for that, I think it is a good upgrade. Then they also changed the texture of the thumb and trigger finger indexing points to match the grips. Now as for the texture quality itself, on the sides of the grip panel, it's pretty similar to what we had on the P-07 previously, but the texture on the front and back straps is a pretty big improvement in my opinion, because they're basically duplicating that almost sandpaperish kind of grip texture on the front and back strap of the new model. Well, the old P-07 model really left a lot to be desired in the texture department on the front and back straps of the pistol grip. Then we have these updated front slide serrations, which upon closer inspection is actually a bigger upgrade than I expected it to be. So comparing the front slide serrations on the P-07 to the P09 C Nocturne, the P-07 serrations looked aesthetically pleasing, but they are pretty short and very shallow, which can sometimes make them a little bit slick or slippery when trying to do press checks or racking the slide with the front serrations. Now in comparison, the Nocturne actually has less serrations, but they're significantly deeper and longer, which gives you a lot more grip when manipulating the slide. In addition to the longer and deeper serrations on the side of the slide, the serrations on the Nocturne also continue across the top of the slide, which can definitely help if you're doing kind of a pinch technique when you're doing your press checks and slide manipulations. So overall, when looking at the initial pictures of the enhanced slide serrations on the Nocturne, I didn't expect it to be that big of a difference, but when holding and manipulating the gun side by side, I can definitely see and appreciate that difference now. Now as for the more subtle changes, the light rail is now a single slot rail instead of a 3-slot Picatinny rail. Now functionally it's really not that big of a difference for most lighting setups, so I'd say it's probably more of an aesthetic difference than anything, and that change did allow them to move the serial number plate to the bottom of the rail instead of on the side of the frame, for whatever that's worth. Now then we have a couple of upgraded controls, specifically the slide lock and release lever and the ambidextrous decocker. Starting with the slide lock and release lever, they made it a lot more similar to the CZ75 series that kind of steps the control out a little bit more from the frame and makes it a little bit easier to actuate it with your primary hand thumb. So I would say that's a subtle difference, but a welcome one. And at some point, if you have a legacy P-07, you're going to be able to upgrade it with these new controls as well, if that's what you'd like to do. Now they haven't really talked too much about the decocker, so I wasn't expecting to be a very big difference. Aesthetically, I would say it's maybe a little bit cleaner, although I think the old one kind of has a cool look to it. But functionally, it's actually a lot more comfortable to use, which kind of surprised me. I find with the old P-07 decocker, the way that they stepped this lever out from the frame kind of caused my thumb to slip off of it a little bit when using it. Now the new one on the Nocturne doesn't have those step out lines, but it has one distinct shelf on the top of the decocker that makes it a lot easier to actuate, believe it or not. So yeah, I really didn't think these controls were going to make a big difference, and I wouldn't say that they're game-changing by any means, but they do seem to work better for me so far, so I would say that that's a win. Now, there were some slight adjustments made to the slide profile, which actually seems to make it so that this gun won't fit in a lot of legacy P-07 holsters, which is kind of unfortunate. That said, I will say that I do personally like the new cuts. I think it has a slightly more aggressive looking profile, but it's definitely inconvenient for people looking to upgrade from their P-07. As you can see here, the P-07 slide is kind of rounded off on the top, but the Nocturne slide is a lot more angular and aggressive looking. And guys, just for the record, don't worry, I am not flagging myself. My face is far away from the camera, guys. Now, they also changed out the iron sight setup here, which is kind of interesting. So the front sight is a traditional left to right dovetail style instead of the front insertion with a set screw style. And then the dovetail on the rear sight is thinner and set further back. I'm not exactly sure what the purpose in changing the front sight was here, but I'm guessing that the rear sight dovetail was moved back to accommodate the optic cut. Now, the magazine bodies themselves are the exact same magazines as the P-07 and P10C, but they did change the base plate to go along with this new cutout in the grip frame. This design is fairly popular and essentially gives you pull tabs to strip out a stuck magazine, which is a nice touch, and thankfully the legacy magazines will fit no problem. So as you can see here, the standard CZ P-07 magazine fits no problem. There's just a little bit of a gap here on the thumb tab pullout. It still actually functionally gives you pretty much the same thing as well. And then the extended magazines from the P-07 suppressor ready models seat without issue as well. Now, these new Nocturne magazines will not fit in the legacy P-07, unfortunately, because of that base plate that extends further up the magazine. Now, you could swap the base plates out if you wanted cross compatibility with models, which is a minor inconvenience, but not necessarily a huge deal. Now, aside from compatibility between different generations, there's also a slight difference in the angle of the base pad here as well. And I have to say, in this instance, I kind of prefer the old style here. So you'll see on the legacy P-07 base plate, it kind of swoops outward a little bit and basically acts as a little bit of a pinky extension or pinky rest. And personally, I find that to be really comfortable when holding the gun. Now, in contrast, I think the design of the base plates on the Nocturne does fit the aesthetic a little bit better. It's a little bit cleaner and smoother looking, but because it doesn't swoop out from the frame like the old version does, it doesn't really give you that pinky rest or extension that the other one did. Now, granted, this is a very subtle difference and is definitely not going to be a make or break situation for the pistol, but something I thought was worth mentioning. And of course, if you like that pinky rest, you can always just use the old style base plates and now you have it again. So that's pretty cool. And then we have this kind of old school CZ style lanyard loop on the bottom of the grip, and I honestly don't know what they were thinking here. The old model of the P-07 essentially just had a hammer spring plug, which was clean and functional, but this lanyard loop honestly just completely gets in the way. All I had to do was slam a magazine home and smash the palm of my hand on that lanyard loop once to know that I'm getting rid of it as soon as possible. Ow. Fortunately, there are multiple places that you can get a standard style hammer spring plug that doesn't have that obnoxious loop, so that's what I would personally recommend doing. And then lastly, CZ changed the naming scheme of the platform, so it's no longer the CZ P09 for the full size and the P07 for the compact. It's now the P09F for the full size and P09C for the compact. Now, this falls in line with what they've been doing for years with the P10 striker fired series, and so if that's any sort of hint to go by, we might actually end up seeing some subcompact models of the Nocturne in the future, and that's something I think a lot of people would really like to see. And that just about covers it here, guys. I do think that most of these changes are very positive, but not necessarily game-changing. The best upgrades are definitely the grip texture and the optic cut, in my opinion. So if you're sitting at home with your P-07 and looking at the new model of the Nocturne and wondering, should you sell that P-07 and get a Nocturne? Honestly, probably not, unless you really want that enhanced texture or the optic cut. And even if you did, you could honestly just get your P-07 milled for an optic by someone like United Firearms, or get your grip stippled and have a very similar experience. In terms of internal components and general functionality, the guns are pretty much identical, so your P-07 is not obsolete in any way at this point. Now, as for me personally, I actually had my P-07 sitting on a shelf at United Firearms getting ready to get some work done for several weeks when the Nocturne was announced. So after a bit of thought, I decided to pull my P-07 off the line and replace it with a Nocturne, mostly for the extra grip texture and improved slide serrations, because I was actually planning on getting my P-07 milled for an EPS optic anyway, but now I don't have to. So with that being said, this Nocturne is now going to be heading over to United Firearms for some fresh barrel ports and some Cerakote work. We've got some really cool ideas that we're discussing, and I can't wait to show you how it turns out. So make sure that you're subscribed to the channel and also to my Instagram so that you don't miss any of my photos or my full range day video with my ported CZ P-09 C Nocturne when it drops. So that's going to be all for today, guys. I've got a ton of handgun reviews on the way, as well as more ARs, AKs, PCCs, and shotguns. Remember to like and subscribe, ring the bell, stay tuned, and thanks for stopping by.